Hello, welcome to episode 95 in this series where I am programming an NES game live on Twitch. Well, partially live on Twitch, partially completely recorded. It's just a habit to say that after so many episodes, but thanks for joining me here. Hopefully we'll get some people who have questions, but if not, we're just going to keep programming like I have been. So I was in the last stream, or the last episode, I should say. I was adding some enemy movement. I wasn't super crazy with it, crazy about it, I should say. We ended up with the enemies just kind of flying by, like you saw there, and you know, that works insofar as it goes. Other than me crashing into the enemies. But the goal of what I was doing there was I wanted the enemies to come from the bottom, partially because I like the idea of the way it imparts a sense of speed to the game. I like that that feels maybe more realistic compared to what might happen in another shooter. I also added the movement of the explosion when you die or when you kill a ship. But as we kind of discussed last time, we had some of the ideas, or I had an idea to have the motion kind of be from a spot, you know, on the bottom of the screen and kind of traverse over towards the player. That didn't work so well. The pattern that we saw there, where it was launching enemies up across the screen, that works, but it doesn't really let the player know that the enemies are coming. And I was thinking, well, we could implement some sort of, you know, feedback, either visual or sound or both, to let the player know that that the enemies are coming up from the bottom. But I thought that was kind of clunky, and I wasn't super happy about that idea. And then I thought about this idea of maybe we could do something where we could have sort of like a, I don't know what you would call it, sort of a long-range defense tower. So the idea being that on the ground there is something that you can see that looks identifiable, and then it fires a projectile which immediately goes down to the bottom of the screen, and then there's a corresponding item that comes up from the bottom of the screen at the in the way that we're seeing here with the enemies now. We could even do that with multiple projectiles, and so you could have something where that sort of telegraphs what's going to happen. So you might have several of the air defense turrets that fire a weapon that from the ground, it's going to, you know, at the speed that the ship is traveling, one can imagine that when it first takes off, it's too slow, and so we kind of pass it. And then they catch up and you know, try to hit the ship. And they adjust their position based on where the ship is as they're taking off. So be a motion sort of like where it fires off here, and then as it's coming down to the bottom of the screen, will hit the bottom and then launch up the screen from that position where the player was. And you know, you can have several of them launching at a delayed interval to track where the player is, and you have to watch where they are at the bottom in order, when they go off screen, to figure out where they're going to track up. So let's implement that, because I think that might be kind of cool. We won't worry about the bottom background part of it yet, because it's not really that important. It's going to be something where the enemy is sort of independent of the background. It's just going to be placed on top of the background tile. So what I want to do is I want to get rid of, well, I don't want to get rid of all of them. Get rid of those, and I definitely want to get rid of those. What we'll do is we'll place one like right here. And what it's going to do is it's going to spawn. So the idea is, I think what we'll do with this is it's going to be sort of several different entities that spawn, right? So we're going to have the main enemy entity, and it's going to have a state, essentially a workflow. If you want to think of it like almost like a state engine, or I mean, it is a state engine, right? So you begin, and it's going to go in, and it's going to spawn what we're going to call the low altitude projectile, right? Which it won't impact the player, and it's going to do that maybe 3 or 4 times. I don't know, we'll see. And then after it's done, it'll be done, right? It'll end. Now, when it spawns these low altitude projectiles, those are going to be the things that we see that kind of fly down off the screen in sort of the position of the player, wherever the player is at the time. And there's going to be a delay there of, you know, maybe like 2 or 3 seconds. So that they're spaced out and have a higher potential of hitting the player. And then, so as those projectiles fly off, they're going to despawn right when they hit the bottom, and they're going to create another entity that's going to then, after a certain amount of time, fly up the screen. So we're talking about 3 different things, right? We're talking about the low altitude projectile. We're talking about actually no, it's just 2 things. We're talking about the low altitude projectile, and then we're talking about the high altitude projectile, which moves up, right? So it's going from low altitude to high altitude, and that will give us our I think that'll give us our sequence. Hey, Bonchaku, thanks for joining. So, like I said, I'm going to make it so that we have a position on the screen where it's going to make some little sprites kind of appear that are going to fly down, and then we're going to get projectiles coming up the screen. Oh, no worries. I was just kind of explaining how this enemy, I had an idea for how to solve the problem of the enemies. Like I said, just when I started, you know, I like the idea of how they're coming up off the bottom of the screen, and I like the speed that they're coming at, but the problem is that there's no way to really know what's happening. So we're going to try and sort of do this as if they were projectiles fired from the ground far below, and then they catch up with the player. We'll see how that looks. I think that'll be pretty cool. So one thing I want to do is get we're going to make a very basic little sprite that we're going to include. Where is my... Not sure how long I'm going to be able to... Oh, split screen. Cool. I'm not sure how long I'm going to be able to do the stream for tonight. I'm tired. It's been a long day. You know, we could just reuse enemy bullet, I think, as our... Well, I don't want to use... So that each of these sprites are entities. We could reuse... We'll rebuild it as... we'll just rename it. Oops. We'll call this low altitude projectile .sprite. And we'll just add it in. This way I'm just going to reuse something we have already, so I'm not spending a lot of time building new things. And it has a new entity type now. Okay, so NES asset tool, export. All right. Symbol LAP is already defined. Draw LAP spread, it's already defined. Why is it saying that? Entities.inc. I don't want them split up like this. Entities.inc error symbol LAP is already defined. I don't even see that. Let's draw entities. How come I don't see it here? That's in the export folder. Am I looking at the wrong thing? Why is this doing this? Jump, draw. Why? What? Did I? LAP sprite. I didn't include it in the project. Why? This is weird. Why is it including it twice? Is it because I reused the bullet? Enemy bullet? I guess so. That's weird though. I don't know why that would be though. Let's take a look. Is it encoding the name in the file possibly and I forgot? Yep, that's why. Okay. I forgot about that. I don't know that I actually need to do that for real, but we'll fix that for now. All right, so assets PNG. And then NES asset tool, PNG to sprite, lap.png, enemy bullet JSON, NES asset tool, lap.sprite. Okay. And then that should fix that, I think. Huh. Did it not update it properly? What did I do? Yeah, so it's got that name, and it's got that palette, and that's all good. And I exported it again, right? Replace. Why is it bringing this in twice? What on earth is it doing? When it loads the sprite. Let's see. Curious to know what is causing it to use the same name twice for the entity, the enemy bullet and the low altitude projectile, even though they're technically no longer the same thing at this point. Here's my call stack. So this is, so that was explode, and that was bullet, and that was player, and that was cloud, and that's low altitude projectile dot sprite. Except that it should be, I thought it would be dot name player cloud low altitude. Low altitude. So why did that get brought in twice? Is it some sort of issue with the file still? All right, so temp, explode, bullet, player, cloud, enemy bullet. So it's getting enemy bullets dot sprite. So project files. after that's all done, we come out of here. And those are still two separate things. So now, at this point, it's looping through the project file count, and if it's a sprite, okay, bullet, player, cloud, enemy bullet, okay. Full path name, yep. So it's replacing that with that. So if it's not a sprite, then we do that. Otherwise, we increment. Why did it increment? Maybe it did. And okay. So that's all good. And then we go to the export process. And from there, we load the map, and these are palettes. And some other stuff that we don't care about right now. This is for the meta tiles. So here's where we're writing the entities. So let's take a look at what we're actually doing here. So current file list name, current file list 0. So let's explode, bullet, player, cloud. What is replacing that twice? Or what is overwriting? It's not updating the sprites there, or at least it shouldn't be. Export. Well, this might be, no, the map meta tiles. Oh, so here where it's adding map meta tile to file system item, current file list. I guess it could be in here that it's doing it. It was fine up until there. So it's already wrong over here. Okay, let's keep going, working our way back. So it must be something in this process here. So if the file exists, so this is where we're actually adding things to the current file list. So let's explode, bullet, player, cloud, so enemy bullets. So let's see. So if the file what is this saying? Enemy bullet dot sprite. Did I like delete that or something? Assets, png, enemy bullet dot sprite. Oh. I did. What? When I, oh, did I? How? I I guess I must have done that when I was... I thought I copied the file, but maybe I just renamed it. Alright, well, that at least explains why it was acting so bizarre. I guess we should put some sort of check-in for that, but I'm not going to do that right now. Already wasted enough time on that. Let's see if now it's not doubling it like it was before. No, it's still doing it. Why? Enemy bullet.char assets. Enemy bullet.sprite. Wait a minute. Didn't I just... Oh, I didn't... Assets PNG. Enemy bullet.sprite. There it is. It wasn't in the right folder. There we go. Okay. That's a weird bug. Alright, so that got added as a thing. Alright, now, the reason we needed to add that was because what I wanted to do is I wanted to change the behavior of the flyby. And you know, I'm just kind of messing with some ideas here. As we get more permanent ideas working, we will stop reusing the same ones. But until then, we're just messing around with stuff. It's kind of like I was saying on the Discord today. This this whole process here has made me realize that I'm an okay game programmer. I am I'm a lousy game designer. Oh, that's fun. Why did that break now? And this process has sort of shown me that I am not a particularly good game designer, at least not yet. And game design is definitely a lot more challenging in my mind than the programming part of it anyway. So let's see here. Like the programming part is pretty concrete. You know, when you have something broken, you can look at your code and figure out why. Design stuff is a lot more difficult to figure out. Is it because I am including... I don't know why I opened that. It's because I'm including... an enemy that does not need to be there. No. So what changed? So the level changed, and I had I had removed the other object from the map completely. Let's see if it doesn't like that I removed the object from the map without actually removing the tile set from the definition. It's possible that that's the issue here. It's another thing we'll have to fix. Okay, so that's out of there, and now yeah, this is no longer relevant. What is this? Draw entities. Why is this still including that? I don't have medium in this list. Is it still being referenced in the JSON? Even though we're not using it anymore. No. Okay. That's something not getting overwritten by the export. Yeah, it looks like it's something that wasn't being overwritten by the export. Or, oh, because it went away, it didn't clear out something that was, interesting. Okay, well, let's see. No reference to medium and shooter.asm. That's still going to be there, I think, for processing it. Which we can get rid of. Compare branch of equal. Okay, so that makes sense that that's still there. Check bullet collision. Yeah, same thing here. Okay, so that maybe is better now? Yes. Okay, good. And there goes the one ship. Okay, good. Back in business. So now what I want to do is, instead of the flyby doing what we were doing on the last time, what I want it to do is I want it to, like I was saying earlier, I want it to spawn a new entity type, the LAP type, and then clear the entity. So let's do that. And then, oh, I guess there is a third thing, because so originally I was saying there was two, but there's really a third thing, right? There's the thing that spawns the low altitude projectile. That's the, we'll call it the turret, right? But whatever it is, it's some sort of thing on the quote-unquote ground, right? So let's use, we'll use the data field, and then we'll load it with, we'll load it and compare it against, let's say we want to launch 3 of them every roughly half second. So we will, let's see, 31 is, or 32 is 2 zeros, so that's what, 1F is the bit pattern I want to use for for my and here. Yeah. So I want to do that so that it will just reset that counter every time. And let's store it back into here. And if it's 0, branch if equal, or branch if not equal to not ready to fire. And then we don't need to use check player collision here. We'll just say not ready to fire. And if it is ready to fire, then what we're going to do is we're going to increment entities plus entity data. No, not data. We have one called timer. I guess we could use timer instead of data, since that's what it's for. And then we'll increment data, and then we will spawn a new entity. We'll use add object to map, or add map object. Is that what it is? Add map object. All right, so yeah, so T1 is the entity type, T2 is X position, and T3 is Y position. So load a entity type LAP stored in T1. Load a, this is the X position, so entities plus entity X position X, store it into T2, and same thing, Y position, store it into T3, if I got that right. Yep. And then we're going to jump to the subroutine, add map object. Okay, so that will add it to the screen where we want it, and to the entities list, and then load a entities. See how many times we've done this, and compare to 3. And branch if equal to clear, what is it, clear entities, I think it was, or clear entity. Now, does this no entity, and then it does that. We should also make it load a 0 and store a. I was thinking about this the other day. I want this to clear out the data and the timer, just so that they're clean the next time around. Okay, so jump branch if equal. What we'll do actually, we'll say branch if not equal, because it's probably going to need this anyway. It's probably going to be out of range, to not ready to fire. Otherwise, jump to clear entity. Right. So it will count approximately half a second, and then it will launch one of the low altitude projectiles, and then after it does 3, they will it will despawn. So now what we need to do is we need to add a process here for the low altitude projectile. So entity type low altitude projectile, not load palette, branch of equal to L process LAP, L process LAP, jump process LAP, and then we'll include Just make a new file here for it. Just kind of proactively, right? So let's see. And what we're going to do in this, oh, you know what we didn't do? So check player collision is at the end of it going to entity complete, but because this doesn't use the player collision, we need to jump to that here. We will also need to jump to that in this location. All right, so then let's start with basic movement, which is let's just increment entities the Y position, right? And then load A with the Y position and compare it to F0, which I think that's the right value. Yep, and branch if not equal to this, otherwise jump to clear entity there, and that should give us something that will start at the should give us something that we will start at the branch unequal. Something that will, if it fires properly, will just fly down the screen. So let's start with that, and then we can do the sort of more sophisticated piece of that in a moment. Okay, so the only thing I did obviously was I stupidly miscounted here, right? Because it's checking after the increment, so it's really doing 0, 1, 2, 3, right? Which means that it fires 4. I also thought that that wasn't long enough. Let's just do 60 frames. Now, one thing to mention, and I've thought about this a little bit, is, well, we can't, let's do 64. So what is it? That's 40? Yeah, that's 40, so that'd be 3F. One thing I was thinking about is if I want to make this PAL compatible, I can't really be counting frames like this, so we'll have to come up with a way of counting that isn't frame dependent. And I know there's stuff on Nintendo Age about, not Nintendo Age, on NESDAV about properly handling that. I will certainly take a look at some of that and see what is the recommended course of, how to handle that. Okay, cool. So that gave us sort of the process I was looking for. I also want this to move a little bit faster, though. So let's do this. Let's load A and then clear and add 4. I think we should, yeah, okay. Just, I'm tired and I didn't want to rely on my brain to do that division and get it wrong, so just wanted to make sure we'd end up at 64. Although, thinking about it, if we're not an even position, yeah, okay, no, that's not going to work. So if we compare, and this is less than, the carry will be set. So branch carry clear, right? Just checking if it's equal won't work, because if it doesn't equal that exact value, and I reverse the condition, because I always do that. I always reverse the condition. You'd think by now I'd get it right. well, that's weird. So that was actually worse than what I thought. Compare. Load the... Okay, first we gotta store this here. That must be what I messed up. Store it and then compare it, and if the carry is still set, then this is smaller. Otherwise, let's see. So this would be smaller, which means the carry would be still set. In which case, or not still smaller, it would be smaller, which means we passed it. Otherwise, the carry would be if the carry is clear, then this is greater than, which is what we want. So we're going to skip. Okay. Yeah, okay. That was more along the lines of what I was looking for. That might even have been a little bit too fast because I wanted to kind of have... there are a few things I want to tweak about how that works. I think I want it to kind of start slow, a little bit slow, and then pick up the speed, almost like it's accelerating as it climbs. And I also want it to adjust the X position as it's doing that, as it's going towards reaching the beginning of where the player is, reaching the altitude of where the player is. It should be adjusting its X position accordingly. So what I want to do is in the, I guess there's no good way, or maybe there is. I think adding the object, add map object, T1 is the index. Okay, cool. So when we go, good, I'm glad I made sure to add that. So when we add the object to the map, T1 is set to the index of the object. So what we can do is we can say transfer A to X, X to A, and then transfer A to Y, just to hold on to it for a moment. I don't want to push it onto the stack. I mean, I think that, well, that might be faster. I'm not sure. Then you can't go X to Y, I don't believe. So let's see, jump sum routine, then transfer X to A, transfer A to Y, load A, T1, transfer A to X, load A entities. No, what I want to do now is I want to say, okay, if the X position of the player, sort of, here, let's draw this because it'll be easier to explain that way, I think. So what I want to do is I want to say, okay, if we have a screen and the player is here and we have the little turret thing here, I want it to be that as we move down the screen, we are also moving an equal amount to match the X position, so that at the very least by the time we hit here, it should be at the position of where the player was when it was launched. So let's see, how would we do that? So we know the speed that I want the speed to increase like an acceleration. So the increments should be bigger each time. And the way we can accomplish that is, let's see. So right now we're just adding the value. We could just, we could do a couple of things. We could make it exponential, where it's just adding, exponential, where it's building on itself. So we could say load A 1 and then store A into the Y position. No, yeah, let's store that into the data And then here, let's just make sure we undo this. Transfer y to a, and then transfer a to x. That undoes what we did here. So we can use that value then to add to the y position, and then we can say, okay, let's load a with the data value. And then I guess we can just shift it because we're essentially just doubling it every time. ASL data. And that'll just shift it to give the sort of acceleration that we're looking for. Let's see how that looks. It might be too fast, I don't know. But it's kind of the right idea. Whoa. That was way too fast. Okay. All right, so a shift is obviously too much. Because it's going from 1 to 2 to 4 to 8 to 16. So maybe we don't want to do an actual multiple, but we want to do something that sort of resembles acceleration. Again, sort of growing in a pseudo-exponential way. So we're going to load the data, and then I don't want to double it. I want to do like, you know, how could I do this? So I guess it's short enough that we could do something like, we can just add 2 to it instead of multiplying by 2. And that wouldn't be exactly right, but it would still kind of give the feeling for it. Like, what I would probably do normally is I would have multiplied by like 1.2 or something like that, so that it's growing, but it's growing building on itself. It's still way too fast, and it's also getting out of bounds. But let's see here. Load A. Did I make a mistake? Just to be sure. So load A, Y position, clear carry, add data, store Y position, load A, add 1. Try just adding 1. Oh, that's the problem. That's the problem. I'm doing this here. Let's do that. Let's check to see if the thing needs to be destroyed, and then we can mess with the speed of it afterwards. All right, that sort of gave the right idea, but it's still too fast. Load A. Let's add a delay. Just in an effort to ensure that we don't have to deal with an out-of-range problem proactively. So that was more along the lines of what I was thinking. I don't know why. It's interesting. Why is the player getting messed with here and this stuck? Player is 3, the entity is 6. Oh, because I am not using the right index. Yeah, that was more along the lines of what I was hoping for, although not as smooth. I don't know that we're going to be able to do as smooth a motion that I wanted just because of the resolution of the screen. It's one thing that I was kind of thinking about as I work on some of these things. It's like even these quote-unquote retro games that are, you know, drawing in that style are not dealing with true low resolution in a lot of cases. I think where you're dealing with actual large pixels, they're able to do some really nice smooth animations and movement despite being a retro style, because they're not mimicking the same low resolution. They're just drawing in a pixelized style, or at least that's what it seems to me. And as a result, it kind of makes it a little unfair in retrospect. Like you're, or not unfair, but like you're kind of comparing to those styles now. I wonder if I can do the shift now and if it'll work, because you know that's what you're used to playing, and you're not kind of looking at this the same way anymore as you used to, and you're just expecting everything to run as smoothly as something like Shovel Knight or Curse of the Moon, Bloodstained Curse of the Moon. If you guys didn't see it, I don't know if anybody cares about this kind of thing, but they recently announced on Limited Run that they're going to be doing a physical release of that game, which is pretty cool. I thought that was a fun game to play. That actually worked. I don't know that I liked the speed, but that actually worked. I guess the problem was the bug from before where it was not comparing properly. So load A, clear carry. Let's go back to this method. I think I like that better. It's also entirely possible that I'm just doing this wrong, and that's why I'm not getting smooth motion. Even though I should. Bonchiku, I'd be interested in knowing, you know, from your experience in terms of dealing with things that are moving either quickly or slowly. Am I wrong in my assessment that the low resolution of the NES kind of inhibits your ability to do sort of smoother movement, or is there some other technique that I'm not aware of in terms of smoothing things out? Because I mean, thinking about it, you know, if you're moving really fast, you know, between frames, you're just going to be jumping, you know, across the screen. And if you're moving really slow, because the resolution is so low, you know, you're just kind of going to dink along from pixel to pixel at that slow rate. There's no way of, to my mind, smoothing it out really, or at least not really well. Y, let's see, so the Y position, does this need to be just adjusted to lower value? Okay, that's reasonably all right. And then what I wanted to do is I wanted to decrease its x until the point that it matches the x position of the player. Now I want to see if I want to do that every time, or just when I'm doing the increments. So let's load A with the entity x position x, and compare that with the player's x position. And if the player's x position is less, then the carry will be set. Otherwise, it will be clear. So branch carry, clear to this, which, so if it's set, then we're going to increment, no, we're going to decrement the this, and then jump to check Y motion, right? And then this one we're going to increment and then check Y motion is here. Let's see here. All right, so that kind of worked. It's not really happy with the way that that looks, though. I mean, maybe we're going to have to update it more frequently with a lower speed increase, and that'll get rid of some of the chunkiness of it. That sort of worked. I'm also wondering, let's see, add character. This is what? This is, yeah, so maybe just every other frame we'll update it, and then we'll change that to be less less of an increment. Let's see. Oh, that actually looked pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that. That had sort of the right feeling to it. The only thing that's not good is the X motion. What I kind of want to do is change it to adjust for the distance. So let's see, if in this case the entity's X position is greater than the players, so let's do this. So we're going to load the entity's X position, we're going to clear the carry, set the carry, we're going to subtract the player position, and then we're going to I don't know why my brain refuses to remember some of these things with these opcodes. I know this is just one of those things that, is it just Shift R? What is it? It's ASL, and then there's rotate right. Shift right. Logical shift right. LSR. So we're going to divide that in half, and then we're going to store that into temp1, and then we're going to load, oops, we're going to load the X position and set the carry and subtract that, and then store it into here. So basically we're going to take the distance between the two, cut it in half and then subtract it. So it should just kind of keep getting progressively closer, but probably it won't ever actually reach it just because of the lack of accuracy in such a small 8-bit number without any sort of floating point. But let's do the same thing here, except instead of that way, we're going to do it a little bit different. We're going to say we're going to take the player position, we're going to load and subtract the enemy position, because in this case the enemy is to the left of the player, and then we're going to load that value, and we're going to clear the carry, and we're going to add carry temp 1, and then we'll restore that, and that should be the motion I'm going for, I think. No reference to unnamed label. What do you mean, branch carry to that? Branch equal, branch carry clear. No reference. Symbol temp 1 is undefined. Oh, it's just temp. Well, fine. Very good. All right, so let's see what that looks like. Okay, so that motion is a little bit too aggressive to happen every frame. So let's do it only when we are processing the Y motion as well. It wasn't terrible, it's just kind of too much. It's a little too, let's instead of dividing it in half, let's divide it in a quarter. This may not work, but we'll see. That was actually not too bad. Now the caveat to that is that if it's if you're too close to it, oh well, actually that worked out. That's not bad. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do anything. I don't know that I'm going to be able to do anything finer than that, because it may shift too many bits off at that point. But let's see. From over here, it gives a pretty nice curve. Let's see over here what that looks like. Oh yeah, that's not too bad. Okay, I'll take that. And that tracks to the player's position. So let's do this. Let's add 2 of them. I know this is water over here, but let's just, I want to see what that looks like. That's kind of cool. It looks like they may have fixed the export in tiled here, which is exciting because it seems to understand that it needs to keep the extension now, which was only sort of a minor nuisance, but it was a nuisance nonetheless. All right, so now we should get 2 of, excuse me, 2 of those turret things firing off the low altitude projectiles. Okay, cool. About the only thing that is now wrong is that they are not staying put. And that is because they are not adjusting their Y position based on the camera. So what we want to do is we always want the, let's see, so what we want to do is we want to load the camera's Y position into the Y world position of the thing at initialization. And then you know, we don't have anything good. We have this data, we have timer. Now, am I using data for anything useful? Increment data, load. Oh yeah, so I'm using that for the counter here. But what we can do is we can use one of the bits. So let's load that. We'll load that and then we'll AND it with 0F because we don't care about the upper bit for the purposes of what we're doing here. So let's load data first and AND it against F0, and then branch if not equal to this part, which means initialize. So if it hasn't been initialized, then what we want to do is we want to load a with the camera. Let's see how this has a Y position, and then plus camera Y position, store that into entities, entity Y world position X, and then +1, and store that into the +1 of that. And then we want to exclusive OR, no, yeah, we'll load A with a 0, and then exclusive OR want, well, just do that and store it into data, and that'll give us a bit here that will skip this part. Right, so we'll branch if not equal. The first time it'll be 0, and we'll do this Y world position adjustment, and then or store. And then what we need to do is, after all of this stuff is, let's see, increment the timer and store A into timer, branch not ready to fire. But regardless of whether it's not ready to fire or what we need to do is we need to subtract its Y world position from the camera Y world position so that we can determine where it should be on screen with the Y position, right? So we're going to take the load A, camera plus camera Y position +1. No, we're going to take the Y world position +1, and then we're going to set the carry and subtract carry entities. You know, we only actually care about the bottom byte. I remember we did this in another thing too. So load the Y world position of the entity, which is going to be greater than the camera or equal to it, and then subtract the camera Y position, and then store that value, which should be X, into this thing. No, into this thing. Offset the item by from the camera based on the difference in the camera Y and the object's Y world position. Only the bottom byte matters because the top byte should always be the same for this object. All right, so let's see what we got here. This should now, yeah, see how they were staying put like that? That's pretty cool. Now what we want to do is, I think we want them to stay, instead of jumping to not ready to fire when they're at 2, or clearing if they're done with firing. Jump to clear entity. So what we want to do is we want to load the entity Y position and compare it to F0, and then branch if not equal to not ready to fire. Otherwise, we're going to clear the entity. So what I wanted to do is, instead of immediately clearing after it's done firing the projectiles, I want it to stay on the screen. That's kind of cool. I want it to stay on the screen and continue to scroll off. The only thing is that because I'm doing the AND, load data and why am I doing that AND here? I don't think I need that anymore. I think I just want to do compare and then increment data. That should be it. I'm not sure what that AND was all about. Compare to branch not equal ready to fire, load A data. Is it still incrementing? Load A data X and F0 branch if not equal. That initializes. Increment the timer. Load A timer X and it by 3F. Store A branch if not equal not ready to fire. Otherwise increment data. Okay, so it should check the number of times it's fired here too. So instead of down below. So load A entities, entity data X. So if timer has reached 0 after and we haven't fired 3 previous bullets. Okay, so branch and ready to fire. Data X, compare it to 2. Branch if equal to not ready to fire, because it should not fire at that point. We don't need to do that anymore. We then just want to take the Y position, and that will determine if it should despawn. I think that got it now. Oh, come on, really? What am I doing wrong? If the timer increments, then is it just something dumb where I'm branch not equal, load A data and F0 branch not equal. So the first time through it should initialize it to 0 or 1-0, and then increment the timer, load the timer, and it against 3F, store it back into timer, and then branch if not 0 to not ready to fire. Otherwise it will load data and compare it to 2, branch if equal to not ready to fire. Otherwise it increments data, and then it does the add of the object, and oh, I guess it should do this check here. right? Load A, entity Y, position X, compare to this. Shouldn't be doing it just when it's firing the object, so... But I don't think that'll fix the fire count issue. Compare branch not equal, ready. Branch not equal, not ready to fire. Load, compare, branch equal, not ready to fire. If it goes to not ready to fire, oh. Yeah, putting it into an infinite loop, not good. What? Oh, come on, really? Branch if equal, not equal. Sorry, dumb mistake. And it didn't even build. I didn't see that. I was just so used to the rote. Okay, so what the actual F? Let's take a look at the debugger. It should be... Whoa, hey. Not quite what I wanted to see there. Flyby. So let's see what happens when we get here. So, okay, so we have data. It is... Why is it FF? Am I storing FF into data? Shouldn't be. Clear entity. If anything, it should have, when it called the initialize code here, it should have made it 1-0. So what's up with that? All right, so that is the initialize code. We are, oh, we're not even hitting that. Why is... I bet it's because I am initializing it that way. Yeah, I am. Clear entities is doing that. Let's do this. I want data to be that, and I want timer to be that. Boom, boom, boom. Okay, so now we're in the initialization code. That should hopefully... Okay, so we hit the point where we're going to launch that, and we're going to compare it. No, it shouldn't be just comparing it straight up to 2. Load A and 0F, because we only care about the lower nibble of that. And then compare it to 2, and branch if equal to not ready to fire. Okay. Alright, so load the data, make it 0, compare, branch of equal, otherwise it increments it, and it adds one. Okay, so that looks like that's fixed now, other than Now the count is maybe wrong. I don't know. I didn't. Yeah, so good. So that should be 3 now. Because of where it's checking it in the code, it had to be changed. Cool. So that's going to spawn those, and then excellent. So then what that's going to do is it now needs to spawn the final part of this. Now what I want to do with these low altitude projectiles, I want to do something where the sprite increases in size over time, so it looks like it's actually coming up higher. But I'm pretty pleased with the way that is working in terms of it kind of giving it a somewhat realistic feeling to the way that that would move. And then okay, and then when this is done and it's going to clear the entity, before it does that, what it's got to do is it's got to create a new sprite here. So LAP is done, so spawn the new sprite. Let's add since we had it before and we know it works, let's add medium.sprite back in. And hopefully this will not go wonky. Okay, so let's make that. Oops, no. Make. Okay, good. And then let's check our draw entities, or sorry, our entities, and we have medium in there again. That's good. And so what I want to do is in low altitude projectile here, I want to use the X position and the Y position of the projectile. Obviously the projectile's X position is going to be the bottom of the screen. Sorry, the Y position is going to be the bottom of the screen. The X position is going to be where we want it to spawn up from the bottom and then destroy the player. So what we'll do is we will, similar to before, we will say, okay, load entities X position X. Actually, the first thing we need to do is load in the entity type and store that into T1, and then we're going to store that into T2, and then we can actually just load a constant here and say it's F0 and store that into T3. And then we're going to JSR add map object. I think that's what it is, right? Add map object. Okay, so we're going to add the map object, and then we're going to clear this entity. So that's cool. And then in the actual main shooter ASM file, well, there should be a couple of things. So medium should already exist as an ASM file, I think. Oh, you know what? No, it was calling the flyby. But that's okay. So let's go to this and so let's create a file called medium.asm. Some of this stuff obviously is going to still change, but I'm actually happy with the way this seems to be kind of flowing in terms of being able to add things relatively easily. I'll process medium, jump to process medium. You know, so whenever we want to add something to the game, we can create a new entity and just have that new ASM file, and seems like that's a pretty simple, I would say, approach to this. All right, so let's see, where did we, I think we had some, not this. You know what we'll do? We'll grab the code that was in there before to replicate the flyby as it was previously, because it was more or less what we want, just in reverse, right? I don't know that I need the bullets to fire, and we can disable that. But let's see, so flyby. Let's open up the diff here so we can grab the prior version, which is this code here, right? Load A this, and then load A or A already initialized. Okay, yeah, so it's just literally kind of floating by. So cool. So this is good, and then it's checking the player collision, process medium, and then the only thing I need to do is I need to increment instead of decrement. Enemy player collision scope. Okay, so let's see how badly this fails. So they should spawn. Oh, wow, okay, so that's not... they're sort of endlessly spawning, but that's not terrible. Oh, you know what it is? They're not despawning. Y, load A, Y position X. Oh, because it's not hitting 0. Let's see. Oh no, wait. It was already going from the bottom up. That's weird. I don't know why I didn't pay attention to it. Just excited that this is actually sort of working the way that I wanted to. Enemy player. Oh. Dumb. 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 Okay. Let's try and see if that spawns now. Cool. All right. So now the only other thing I would say that's actually pretty neat is I want it to, instead of having them immediately appear, I want to give a moment of delay to give the player a moment to think about where the things are coming from and get out of the way. So, but only a moment. So let's say 15 frames, branch if not equal to enemy not complete, can't spell. Entities has an I. Great. Now these aren't going to be enemies that you can necessarily easily destroy. The point is that they are going to be more of like an avoidance thing. There are going to be plenty of enemies that you will be able to... Oh, come on. What am I doing here? That's wrong. Load, increment, timer, load it, compare it, branch if not equal. So it's set to 0. Load data X, branch not equal to already initialized. Store Y position, load 0, just store it. Load A 0, store it in timer, increment the timer, load A, compare to 0F, branch if not equal to enemy not complete, otherwise decrement, load A, branch if not equal, okay. What is with these timers? So you can see the entities are loaded there. But they are not doing anything. I imagine that what's going to happen. Oh, they're... Oh. Yeah, that was silly. Load A. I don't want to do that every time. I just want to do it at the beginning. So load a data and with 2. Branch if not equal to skip time delay. This is skip time delay. This will do that, and then compare branch if not equal to that. Otherwise, load A with 3, because we know that's what we will have at the end with this. Store this there. Great. And then skipping the time delay will get us into there. That should do it. Let's see. Yep, okay, cool. So the time delay is not enough, but it is... Right, because if it's... Let's just see here that I'm not totally out of my mind. Okay, cool. So that is correctly working now. Just need to change the timer to something a little more reasonable instead of FF, and then make sure that it's decrementing in such a way that it will die off screen. Okay. Now just to make sure we're getting 6 of those. Oh. cool. So that is working. Do I want to make this go even faster? Interesting. Okay. That could work. Let's do this. So it's decrementing 3 times, and then it's loading, and then it's branching if not equal. Let's compare it to 0. Well, yeah, let's compare it to 0, and then if it's less than 0, well, that would mean it would be negative. So basically, if the value has rolled over because it's gone past 0, what we would get is that we are comparing it and it's larger, which means the carry would be set still. So branch carry clear to enemy not complete, otherwise clear the entity. I think I thought about that right. We'll find out in a moment. Well, no, because, dummy, that is a problem. When you first launch it, it will, of course, be greater than 0. So, yeah, that's not going to work. How do I test that? If I compare it to F, let's say we compare it to F1, we started at F0, and if it's greater than F1, which means it will have wrapped around, then let's see, the value will be greater than this, so it will, let's see, it's greater than, so the carry will be set still. Otherwise, it'll be clear. Let's try that. Working with 8-bit numbers is tiring sometimes. Okay, that behaved the way I wanted it to. So now, obviously we're going to have other types of enemies, but these things will spawn as you are flying and dodging those other enemies to kind of give you some other things to have to avoid. And again, what I like about these is that they sort of telegraph their position by first shooting out the little projectiles that don't hurt you, but then tell you basically where the actual enemy that is attacking your ship will be. And then maybe we can do something with a power-up that will protect you from rear attacks like that. That'd be kind of cool. Let's see, so we should get a whole bunch of these things now. Of course, the player is dead now, so doesn't really know where to spawn them. I'm not very good at avoiding these. Basically, in this, you just kind of you have to pick a spot and then kind of weave so that so that they can't get you. We'll have to tweak this so that it's actually possible to get past this section, and maybe actually destroy some of them. Oh, it's letting me shoot those down. I guess it shouldn't let me do that if they're a turret object way down on the ground, but that's okay. That's just because of the way we kind of hacked this together. Oh, crap. So I can see this being something where we probably don't want to overuse it too much when you have other enemies coming on the screen that you're also trying to avoid or attack. Maybe we stagger them and we oh man, because yeah, I can see where this would end up being really difficult to deal with if you have too many. Like we could do something where we want to kind of space them out a little bit more. Maybe alternate them or something like that. To give you a fighting chance at actually doing something about them. Like, yeah, hardcore mode, right, yeah. Just trying to, you know, at the very least avoid them, but potentially also shoot them down for points, I guess, right? People care about points with these kinds of games, typically. Did I not export it properly? Export as JSON, yes. Make NES asset. Oh, I didn't make it. So the next thing I need to do, I think, is start maybe pulling all of these pieces together in the make process so that I don't have to remember to run them individually. Oops, I died. I'm cheating. Pretty happy with that motion. Oh, man. I'm not happy with the fact that I keep dying. It's kind of nice that it uses your own position, because if you try and do too wide of a spread, it definitely, oh man, it definitely sort of backfires because you give yourself limited areas to move to. And again, this will be combined with some other pieces, other enemies, obviously. But all right, I think that's it for tonight. A little bit longer than I wanted to go, but I was having fun working on getting these things to actually process the way that I wanted. Well, that was kind of cool. Maybe there is some sort of like low altitude weapon that you can use to destroy them so that you're not having to dodge all of them firing these projectiles at you. Or maybe they don't stop. Maybe it's not just limited to 3. Maybe it's, you know, sort of a timed onslaught that, you know, it does 3 and then it does 3 more, and then, you know, you start having to, like in a section like this where you have to maneuver, and I don't know how many of these kinds of sections we'll have at the low altitude, the high altitude sort of mode where it's moving slowly in the background. I don't know how many of those we'll have where you have to be in a specific position, where those kinds of things might be difficult or impossible to deal with without a special weapon. Maybe we'll do that in a section where you can only make it through with a special weapon or power-up, because you have to be able to defend the rear of the ship in order to maneuver the specific location precisely while those kinds of enemies are firing at you. And if you don't have the weapon, there's a path that's clear on one side that allows you to maneuver and kind of dodge the fire. But if you don't have it and you try and do that little section, you're almost guaranteed to blow up. I don't know. We'll see. But anyway, thanks for watching. It was sort of a quieter stream tonight, but that's okay. Got a lot done, and pretty happy with what we did manage to get done tonight. So as always, if you want to reach out to me on Twitter, I'm at Clairvis. I'm also on Nintendo Age as Zelius. You can email me. As I mentioned in the last episode, I will be doing a Zero Pages episode 4 that is sort of a beginner's coding on the NES to get a sprite on the screen. Martin, who is usually on the stream as MDTA UK, suggested that I make that code available not only as part of the description of the video, but even as a GitHub file, so people could pull it from there and maybe even suggest changes or something. I don't know, but regardless, I'm good with that. And so that's what I'll do, is I'll make that available as a project on GitHub, and then we will kind of use that as our a template for other things we do in the Zero Pages. But the nice thing is that it will be episode 4 will be literally me kind of going piece by piece of the code, and explaining why it works that way for getting started, and explaining some of the higher level and lower level concepts at the same time as we're doing it, rather than focusing on sort of the more background topics that we've been covering, like how to get the compiler installed, what number systems are, and what assembly language are. At this point, I think have covered that well enough that we can get into some actual code. So have a good night and have a good weekend if I don't talk to you before Monday, and thanks for watching. Take care.